Okay, one thing I do want to let you know, if you are joining us as a church, we decided to do something. A good number of months ago, we decided we're going to read the Bible together from cover to cover. And so we kind of came to this agreement that through the week, we as a church would all be reading the Bible together, and then on Sundays, we'd get together and try to, if you will, see the big picture. You know, sometimes as you're reading through the Bible, it's tough to understand. What am I even reading? And so on Sundays, we just try to orient ourselves to what it is we're reading together. We're now in the book of Ecclesiastes. A couple of weeks ago, if you were here, we got started in this book. Today, I want to talk about just one verse in the book of Ecclesiastes. If you're able to do so, grab a Bible. There's Bibles in the chairs around you. You can turn to page 475 if you use one of our church Bibles. If you have a cell phone with a Bible app, you can use that as well. Whatever you have, turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 12. I really want to spend some time thinking about just this one verse, what the implications of this verse are, what it means, and what we need to take in as we let this verse kind of soak in. And so, again, I hope you have a Bible. I'd ask that you keep it open as we proceed. We're going to look at some other passages as well. Ecclesiastes chapter 6 at verse 12. And this is what that verse says. It says, "For who knows what is good for a man in life? During the few and meaningless days he passes through like a shadow. Who can tell him what will happen under the sun after he is gone?" Now, I draw your attention to these three words at the end of this verse, under the sun. I pointed them out to you a couple weeks ago, and here's the premise of the book. In fact, do this. Turn back to chapter 1. I just want to read the first three verses again with you. We'll get back up to speed about what this whole book is about so that you can see this one verse in its context. This is what the book is about. David's son Solomon was widely regarded to be the wisest man who ever lived. And at some point, he decided that he was going to set out to apply this wisdom to the things of this world. And basically what he decided is, okay, I want to take a good, hard look at this world as if there was nothing in this world except this physical world. So if you can separate out maybe the spiritual from the physical, Solomon said, what if there was no God? What if we just bracketed him out? And all there was is what's under the sun, what we see, this physical world. What would it be? What would it look like? And so, chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "The words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem." He means to teach us. Hey, I've thought long and hard about what this world would be like if there were no God, if all that there was what you see under the sun. And then he says this, meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does a man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? You see those three words again. They're really a theme to this book. Okay, if you just looked at what's under the sun, this physical world, you bracketed out God, you bracketed out the spiritual, what would you be left with? It's a joke. It's a cruel, cosmic joke. Our life is meaningless. It's ridiculous. I don't appreciate it. Those are the kinds of things that he has to say in this book. If you were here a couple weeks ago, we talked about this, that one of the themes in this book is that if there's no God, there's just no way to make sense of some of the desires that we have. Solomon, as he looks at life, he says, you know what, we human beings, we have desires that there is absolutely nothing in this world that can satisfy them. You can't satisfy them with a relationship, no matter how good. You can't satisfy them with a career, no matter how good. There's just absolutely nothing you can do to satisfy the insatiable desires of our heart. If there's no God, that's ridiculous. It's a joke. We just suffer. I mean, we think it's in work, it's not. We think it's in relationships, it's not. I mean, everything we do, it's pointless, it's meaningless. I'll give you a good example. We didn't talk about this a couple weeks ago when we introduced this book, but look at chapter 3. In chapter 3, there's really probably the most famous passage of the book of Ecclesiastes. And this is how it goes. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to mend, a time to weep, a time to laugh. It goes on. I think you could probably make a pretty good song out of this. Anyway, in verse 11, he says this: God has made everything beautiful in its time. This is his point, You look at our life, there's a lot of wonderful things. I mean, it's just great. You get this taste of what God has designed and put into things. And there's really a time for everything. I mean, when we're born, when a child's born, even the times of dancing and weeping. I mean, there's a way in which if you look at any individual life and you just survey it, you'd say, wow, God, you're wonderful. You've done great things. But then the rest of verse 11 says this: yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men. So not only is there a time in this life, but, okay, this is what it's saying. Somewhere in our heart, beyond the times of this world, which are all great, they're beautiful, they're lovely, we have this thing that we deeply believe in called eternity. And, we so deeply hold this belief. You will never go to a funeral and say, well, that person is done. You just won't do that. You have like this holy sense, like although they've died, they've continued. And when we think about our own life, we say, you know what? I don't know how I know this, but I just know that when I draw my last breath and close my eyes, that won't be it. Don't you? It's in there. Sometimes we try to suppress it. We try to think, oh, that's not true. But it's in there. And this is Solomon's point. If we have that in there, what a cruel joke if it's not true. If there's no God and all there is a physical world, and the truth of the matter is dust to ashes, and all this striving, it's all for nothing, it's meaningless, he says. We have these desires, eternity is one of them, that nothing in this world can fill. And if God's out of the picture, then it's just a cruel joke. It doesn't make sense. It's all meaningless. It's all vanity. This is just empty. And that's his point. Now that we remember the theme of the book, I want you to look again at chapter 6, verse 12. This is the point that Solomon's making. Again, if you were to bracket out God, and all there is what's under the sun, this physical world, then basically what he's saying is, at the end of the day, there's really no such thing as good and evil. There's really no such thing as right and wrong. And there's really no final justice that's going to take place that sets right the wrongs of this world. He says, for who knows what is good for a man in life during the few and meaningless days he passes through like a shadow? Who can tell him what will happen under the sun after he's gone? He's talking here, of course, about morality, what's good, what's bad. And he says, listen, if all there is what's under the sun, if all there is this physical world, then who can really say authoritatively what's right and wrong, what's good and bad? Who can even begin to think that all the wrongs of this world will at some point be set right and there's such a thing as justice? If there's no God, then there's nothing like that. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I rarely do this, but I'm going to today, just so you know where I'm going. I'm going to put on the screen now everything I'm going to say in this sermon. So after I'm done putting it on the screen, if you want to tune out, you already know ahead of time, but I'm giving you the roadmap. This is what I want to say. The first thing, I'm going to make an observation. I'm not going to try to prove a point, just make an observation. That most often, the person who decides, you know what, I believe there is no God. They decide to be an atheist or an agnostic, and they just say, that's what I believe. The reason for doing so most often, this is my observation, is not because they're intellectual or academic problems. I'm not saying that there aren't legitimate intellectual problems. Even myself, I have intellectual doubts at times. What I am saying is that's not usually the primary reason someone says, I have decided I don't believe in God. Usually, the reason someone says I don't believe in God is this: I just want to be free. I don't want some cosmic deity telling me what I should and shouldn't do. I don't want some God up there telling me I can't do that or I should feel guilty about that. I just want to be free. Second thing, this is what I'm going to say. It's going to be counterintuitive, and I'll explain it when I get there. The only way to be truly free is to submit. That probably sounds pretty counterintuitive. I'll explain it when we get there. And then third, I'm going to say this: if you'll submit yourself to God, you will get more freedom than you ever bargained for. So let's take these one at a time. First, I want to say this, it's just an observation I'm going to make, that most often the reason that people say, I don't believe in God, has nothing to do with just all the intellectual doubts. I mean, not that there aren't some, but that's not the primary reason. The primary reason is because I just want to do what I want to do. I want to be free. And most of the time, if you're talking to an atheist, they'll never admit this. Like the very famous atheists like Bertrand Russell and Stephen Hawking, they won't tell you that, but actually, I have a quote here. It's from Aldous Huxley, who was a famous atheist, and he was actually brave enough, in my opinion, to actually say the truth. And this is what he wrote. He said, I had motives for not wanting the world to have a meaning. Consequently, assumed that it had none, and was able, without any difficulty, to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. So what he's saying is, hey, look, I mean, at the end of the day, I finally did have my intellectual reasons why there was no God, but he said, I had motives. And he goes on to say this, the philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is not concerned exclusively with the problem of metaphysics. In other words, even a philosopher, it's not purely about academics. He says he is also concerned to prove that there is no valid reason why he personally should not do as he wants to do, or why his friends should not seize political power and govern in a way that they find most advantageous to themselves. You see what he's saying? He's saying, look, I mean, it's like a moment of honesty. I had these intellectual reasons, but that wasn't it. It was really, I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. And in fact, his quote goes on, he says, for myself, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation, sexual and political. We really know what he's talking about, right? I mean, there may be some of you here today, your friends dragged you through, you don't even know why you're here at this church, and you're probably saying to yourself, I really doubt there's a God. Or maybe you've even concluded in your mind, there is no God. I'm challenging you to just consider why you think that. And just thinking about his thought, I won't talk about you, I'll just talk about me. So, you graduate from high school and you move away for the first time and you're off on your own. And my parents were here in the earlier service, so I had to be careful what I said. But, I'm finally free, right? I can do what I want to do. I don't have to follow rules. And the last thing I need to do is feel guilty about all that. And so you take a Philosophy 101 class or some religion class that the university offers, and the professor stands up and gives some reasons why there is no God, and it's not because you say, wow, that guy is the smartest guy I've ever met, but it's because on Friday night, I want to do what I want to do. You say, that guy has a point. There is no God. I mean, it's not just me, is it? Anyone else? You've been in kind of the same boat? I mean, I think, not that there aren't some intellectual reasons, I'm not saying that, I'll get to that, but primarily, we have these mixed motives at the very least, and probably even more so, it's something in here. I just want to do what I want to do, and I don't need some cosmic deity telling me that I should feel guilty about it. And that's the reason I don't believe in God. Now, if you're with me, and if that even is plausible to you, then let me make just two observations. First observation, if you adopt that belief as a result of that kind of stance, you will find a principle working within you where your mind and your heart will be in constant conflict. They'll be opposing each other, and you will have this inner turmoil that you're going to have to figure out what to deal with. I'll explain more in just a minute. And I would say, I'll go even farther after I explain that to say, you're actually going to find that the more that conflict rages, the less and less free you'll be. And furthermore, you're going to find that that conflict actually starts harming your life. Let me take this one at a time. What do I mean when I say that your mind and your heart will be in opposition to each other? And, okay, here we are. It's chapter 6, verse 12. The question is, okay, what's good? Like bracket, okay, there's no God. Let's just grant that if you walk through these doors today and you don't believe it, let's grant your premise. Let's start with it. Okay, there's no God. Then, is there such a thing as right and wrong, good and bad, good and evil? Is there such a thing as ethics or morality that's universal to everyone? Let's talk about human rights. So I think most of us, as we walk through these doors today, we believe these words with all our heart, that I have the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We believe that. Why? Why do we believe it? And we have kind of a moral crisis going on in the United States right now because we don't even know why we believe that anymore, because God's been taken out of the equation. And so let's just kind of follow. There's a lot of writing that's being done. And secular writers right now are saying, okay, the era has long passed where we can appeal to God. Now we've got to find something else to base our morality, our ethics, and human rights on. And there are generally two different ways that people try to do it today. The first of which is this. We'll ground human rights, ethics, and morality in nature. And the argument is, listen, there's just something out there in nature that if we observe it, we will see that we do in fact have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There is such a thing as right and wrong, good and evil. And it's just inherent in nature. And there are all kinds of people who try to make that argument. Let's think about it. This is my response. If you believe that, have you ever watched nature? And I don't mean that in any kind of like confrontational way, but I mean, here's what happens when I look out in my backyard. There's a lake back there. I don't know if you can see this picture. It's a bird eating a fish. And let me just tell you something. The bird never stops as it comes down, swoops on that helpless fish to think, wait a second, this fish has rights. He has the right to life, and I'm going to violate it. The fish never protests. I'm like, what are you doing? That's wrong. That never happens. A second picture. I don't know if you can see this picture well either, but it's a picture of ants cannibalizing a fly. This poor, helpless fly. Wait a second. How can they do that? We really need to protect the weak against the strong. Nature never says that, right? I mean, it's beautiful out, but this is what's going on if you take a look. A lion eating its prey. Again, I mean, there's no wait a second, that life is valuable. We shouldn't do this. Where in nature, except among humans, do we find anyone who says, this is wrong, we should stop this? And this is a point I'm trying to make. I mean, there's no way in which nature is a proper ground for human rights. We'll bracket out God. So here's the basic story that those who have no God will say, listen, this is how nature came to be. There's this primordial accident where lightning struck this primordial ooze, and all of a sudden there were like these cellular creatures which came to life, and they became more complex, and the strong, outlasted the weak, and it was survival of the fittest, and different species have come and gone because this species was stronger than that species, and this species killed out that species, and it's like a red-tooth, nail and claw account, and now all of a sudden we're the height of that, and we're saying, this is all wrong. Everything that's happened to get us to this point, we got to stop that. There's nothing in nature to ground human rights on. To say, listen, putting this group of people down or to the side or segregating this group from that group is wrong, and they have the right to life and no one should take it. There's nothing in nature. A second place that people try to ground ethics today is society. I would say this actually, shows more promise than the first. I can't see anywhere in nature where you'd say, okay, there, I see it, that's where human rights come from. But maybe society, maybe it's this. Our society basically, we try to maintain a community. And our parents told us right and wrong. Our society kind of decides what's right and wrong. And every society is sort of different from each other. In one society, this is okay. In another society, that's okay. And you've just got to live according to the norms of society because it's for the benefit of us all. And maybe that's why society wants to protect the weak, because it's good for everyone. Maybe that's why society says, hey, we've got to have people who are free so they flourish. And it's good for everyone. But I'd say that if you give it some thought, this cannot possibly be true. I have a letter here. Some of you'll know it very well. It was written by Martin Luther King Jr. Some of you know the context. Actually, in the middle of the civil rights movement, he was put in jail in Birmingham, Alabama. And there was actually a group of 8 white pastors who wrote an open letter to him asking him to stop. Hey, why are you doing this? You're disrupting society. You should just follow the law. And in his jail cell, actually on newspaper, he scribbled out this letter that he wrote, and he actually gave it to lawyers bit by bit, who then collected it and put it together. And this letter is called Letter from a Birmingham Jail, and there's just one section I'd like to read. This is what he says. He said, "One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others?" He says, "The answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust. I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. One not only has a legal but moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely," he says, "one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all." Then he says, "Now, what is the difference between the two? How does one determine whether a law is just or unjust? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. An unjust law is a code that's out of harmony with the moral law. To put it in the terms of St. Thomas Aquinas, an unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in the eternal law and natural law. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. All segregation statutes are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. It gives the segregator a false sense of superiority and the segregated a false sense of inferiority." What was he saying? He was basically saying, listen, society cannot determine the law. He was saying there's actually another law that stands above every society's law, and that makes some societies have unjust laws, which he said we have a moral obligation to not follow. And he said this, until all the laws of human society match that higher law, we can never stop. And I don't know about you, but I think he was right. I mean, can a society just vote that we should exterminate these people, and well, that's what society says? Can a society say, well, we're going to put this one group of people to the side, and okay, that's society makes up that's where human rights come from? I'd say no way. It's not nature, it's not society, and you even get the hint of it in Martin Luther King's words. It leaves only one more possibility, God. And I want you to think, if there's a God, human rights make all the sense in the world. Think about it. There's a God who, after he created everything in the universe, he made human beings in his own image, which means they're special, which means that he cares for them, that they're to be loved, that every individual, whether they're weak or strong, has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The framers of our Constitution knew it because, as I said, our Creator endows us with these rights. We've just forgotten today. Anyway, so here's what Solomon's saying. He's saying, look, right and wrong, good and bad, human rights, justice. If you bracket God out, then there really is none. You may have personal tastes, you may prefer to not take advantage of weak, but there's no real right and wrong, only if there's a God. Now, I'll come back to my main point. There will be a conflict between your head and your heart. If your head says there's no God and I can do whatever I want, there's no deity who tells me what I shouldn't do, and I don't want to feel guilty about everything, and you decide that's what your head's going to say, but your heart knows there's right and wrong, good and bad. And our heart does. There's not a person who walked through these doors today who can say, man, I didn't know there was no right and wrong. We all know it in here. There's a conflict. And that conflict, by the way, not only will create inner turmoil in your heart, but it'll start to make you less and less free. And here's what happens. We start to become addicted to various different sins. We start to have hurts from the things we did that's wrong. We start to have these hang-ups, and it starts to actually finally harm us, and we become, I would say, less and less free. Let me try this. Somebody here, you got a really nice iPhone? Anybody? Take it out. If someone has a nice one. A good iPhone. Okay, Aaron, thank you. Can I borrow it? Okay, so Solomon's saying, okay, bracket God out. There was no creator. We just evolved. But let's just go back to the idea that there might have been a creator. I would say, this is a really good phone. Thank you. How do we know it's a good phone? I would say that the moment you create something, you automatically, there is inherent in the thing that's created rules for right and wrong operation. So if I use it the right way, I can talk on the phone, I can, get little app messages back, I can tell the time. I mean, it works. This is really nice. What if I don't follow the rules? Let's just say, as an example, I have in my pocket here a nail. And let's just say I want to determine whether this is a good phone or not. So what I decided to do is nail this nail into this piano using the phone. Let's find out if this is a good phone or not, okay? Ready? Okay, I won't actually do it. But what would result? I walked back to Aaron. I said, I told you to give me a good phone. This phone, it couldn't even nail that nail into the piano. Aaron would say to me, what? Well, that's not what a phone's for. There's rules for operation. If you break the rules, what happens? Harm. Thanks, Aaron. The same is true about humans. If there's a creator, then there's automatically rules for right and wrong operation. If we say to ourselves, I don't care about the rules, I'm going to do whatever I want, then automatically, not only will you have this war between your head and your heart because you know that what your head's saying is not true, and not only will you begin to harm yourself because you'll get these hurts, habits, and hang-ups, but finally, you'll create real harm to yourself because you're doing something with your life that you never should. Does that make sense? Okay, that's just only my first point. The second two are going to go really fast, I promise. So here's my second point. It's counterintuitive. The only way to be truly free is to submit. Now, some of you, as I say that, you say to yourself, wow, I don't know what to make of that. Let me explain. Let's suppose that there were two people and they both had a car. And, of course, there was a creator of this car. They designed the car. They set the rules for its operation. And two people owned the car. And one of those persons said, you know what? I am sick and tired of high gas prices. And so that second person said, I'm not going to put gas in there anymore. I'm going to put water. And you say to the manufacturer, don't tell me what I should do. I'm not going to feel guilty about the fact I'm putting water in there. Okay? One person is constrained, has submitted themselves to the instructions. They put gas in there. The other person is free. I'm not going to do what anyone tells me. I'm going to do what I want. And my way is the best way. And I'm free. And look at that sucker over there who submits to the laws of that car and, is so bound up. Okay? What's going to happen to the person who puts water in their gas tank? They're not going anywhere, but they're free. No, they're not. They're stuck. They're bound. The person who submits themselves to the law of the Creator is the one who gets to drive the car and fulfill its purpose. And the same is true with your life. If there's a God and He created us, the only way you'll flourish and be free is if you submit to the rules by which He made us. Does that make sense? Counterintuitive at first, but that's the truth. Final thing I want to say now, number 3. If you submit, you'll get more freedom than you ever bargained for. Man, I hope you'll hear this point. Some of us who walked through these doors today said, you know what? I don't believe in God. I want to be free. You'll be more free than you ever bargained for if today you'll surrender your life to God. Let me tell you what I mean. So, if we've been free and I can do what I want, then undoubtedly, you've already started to feel the effects of the fact that life is a little bit meaningless, empty, like some of the words we've read. Undoubtedly, you're feeling the effects that, many of us, we're already saying this, like, I'm a broken person. Why? Because I haven't followed God's law. I'm broken. I'm hurting. And here's the deal. Not only did God create us in such a way that that if we fear him and keep his commands and follow his ways, that we'll begin to flourish. We'll be able to take the car out for a drive. Not only is that the case, that our life will start to feel meaning and purpose, and we'll find a power that fuels us. If there are Christians who are here today, I'm sure they can tell you this. It's not that our life is different, but it is. We still have all the same troubles, but there's this power behind our life and this meaning and purpose which was never there before. Not only is that the case, but here's what's awesome. So our sin, it starts to bind us up. We get less and less free, and God loves us so much. This is what he did. He sent his son, Jesus. And the reason he sent his son, Jesus, is because he loves us, and he doesn't want to see us bound the way that we are, hurting the way that we are. And he came to heal us and set us free. It's our saying to him, I don't need you, I want to be free, our walking away from him, that created the chasm between us and him. There's nothing we can do about it, but God in his love sent his son Jesus to bridge that chasm, to close the gap. He came to die on the cross so that he could take all our guilt, all our shame, all the things that bind us up, and put it on Jesus, and he could bear the weight of that so that the burden could be lifted off of us. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus came to make us free. And if, by faith, you'll put your lives in God's hands, if you'll surrender your lives to Jesus, not only will you be able to drive the car, your life will flourish in a way you never imagined or dreamed possible. Not only is that the case, but you will be free from your guilt, free from your wounds, free from your brokenness in a way that you never imagined possible. And if there's someone who walked through these doors today and you said, you know what, I don't believe in God and I just want to be free. If there's anything I said that made you just take a second look at it, and you're pausing in your mind and saying, you know what, my heart does know there's a God. My heart does know there's an eternity. My heart does know that I'm special, that God made us, that we're not just like the ants and the other creatures of the field. I know that I didn't just crawl out of a primordial ooze. If there's any part of you who says, I know that when I die, there's something more, and it's God. If there's any part of you that knows when you look up at the stars in the night that there's a God in the universe who made it, if there's any part of you know that there's a God who loves you, why not right now, today, finally be free? By submitting your life to God and surrendering yourself in faith to Jesus Christ.